We're gonna
Where's everyone else?
we'll see. Hopefully, people will join in. Let's see. Last time I know Adrian was busy putting the boat on the river, I guess, because I was looking forward to see how he will tell us, but I guess maybe he'll join us a little bit later. We'll see how it goes. But you suggested to Kiko, how do we all have our Pesach customs in the family, with the friends? You want to kind of start it off? What you had in mind?
I didn't have anything in mind. No, just anything. Just a conversation starter.
Okay.
I actually came across something completely non-related today, something very interesting.
Go ahead.
No, sometimes you're like, you know something or you've learned something, but some things didn't actually click until, I don't know, you hear it in a different context. So that the space within a circle is finite, but the circle itself is infinite. It's just an interesting concept because Kabbalistically, this is a concept which is very, very much discussed. Not in that context, but it's the general question: how God, who's infinite, can create something that's finite. And generally, this is a concept which is very difficult, or if not impossible, to really grasp and understand. Whereas it seems this is something we see within nature, even, everywhere. It's interesting. Anyway, fine.
Hi,
It was just on my mind. That's all.
Roman, we have your picture, but we don't see your video. You might want to turn the video on.
You talk about the infinite, but the interesting question to me is how human beings who are quite clearly finite can imagine and talk about the infinite.
Yeah, we do it in math. We do it in maths, and we do it in physics, and we do it in religious studies as well. Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. It doesn't make any sense.
I tell you, for me, for some time ago, it completely stopped bothering me. Because I went through in my younger days, Aristotle, some Plato and Hegel, and the philosophical, do we exist? Is it just perceptions? And then I came to a point that it's kind of exercise in futility. I'm not going to get anywhere with that. But I like that like infinity. I understand the concept. I feel the concept of the point. If you're decreasing the circle, as you just mentioned, circle is finite. And the circumference around is in infinite. But if you start squeezing the circle, as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it's still finite. But it gets to a point where it becomes infinite, because the area eventually, if you squeeze circle to zero, but it never can become zero. It's still a little bit something. But if you can squeeze less and less and less, and then eventually it gets to the point that if you squeeze it much harder, you could go to minus infinity. It's called the transit sort of singularity. And I remember, I think you guys, Brits, probably will know more than me and O. Henry. There's a very famous, no, not famous, a story about the guys, one of O. Henry's writings, that there was a town or the country, and there was a wall, and they never can go past this wall. If you climb up a big wall, and there was like a fog, and if you go through the fog gets denser and denser and denser, and everyone was afraid to go through the fog. They never knew what's on the other side. Eventually, one visitor came to this town. He said, "I'm going to find out what's on the other side of this fog." That for centuries, for years, people just didn't know what's behind the wall. We just live here, we know what's here, but we don't know what's beyond this wall. So he climbed up there, he took a rope, and he had the rope, and he kept coming away into the fog, got deeper and deeper and deeper, and eventually get so deep, they couldn't see anything, so dense. And as he kept on walking, the fog started getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And as he kept walking, and he then finds out he walking to the faces of the people that he just left. He say, "Hi, you're already back." He says, "Well, I never came back. I just kept going straight." So he went through these things on the other side. He came back to the same place from when he left. People waiting for him. And I don't know how he explained the fact of the rope. And the rope still kept hanging to him and to people who just met. So we cannot explain that singularity in infinity, but we all understand that it exists and exists at such a level that we probably never will be able to understand. It shouldn't burden our minds with.
It's just one of Isha's pictures, that's all. Escher, what do you call him?
Maurice Isha, yeah. We went to an exhibition of his work in Greece when we were on holiday, of all places.
Uh-huh.
He explored this in his wonderful etchings.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So Menachem, your mind stranded from Pesach celebrations into the concept of infinity and finite, how mind grasps it. Would you care to elaborate on that, or you go?
I don't know. There's just one thing on my mind. That's it. John was in the middle of saying something. I mean, about how we even able to discuss such a thing.
Okay.
If you wanted to.
Just thinking that, in fact, the concept of infinity took some time to filter into human thought. Primitive peoples can count 1, 2, 3, many.
Mm-hmm.
They can't count beyond a certain number. 3 is quite typical. And it was a leap of imagination to say, well, you just keep adding 1 and keep on doing it and just don't stop. So the point is, you can't get to infinity. It's merely a concept. But it's a concept that you can work with. Wasn't it Cantor, the mathematician, whose Jewish origin is betrayed in his name, isn't it? Cousin. He classified different infinities. There's the infinity of numbers, the infinity of areas, the infinity of volumes, and he called them Aleph 0, Aleph 1, Aleph 2. But I don't know enough mathematics to explain them to you.
But what was his name?
Cantor.
I see up here, John.
His first name, and I can't quite remember it.
I'm reading that you can actually add infinities.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive.
George Cantor, I see it.
Yes, I think you may be right. But if you add infinity to infinity, you get the same answer. It's one of its paradoxes, isn't it?
Well, mathematically, infinity could be of different strengths. Mathematically, let's say if you take a sum of the numbers 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 and so on and on, right? You get infinite number. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus and so on for infinite. Eventually will be zillions, trizillions, and more and more and more. But what if you add not 1 plus 2 plus 3, but square root of those numbers? 1 squared plus 2 squares plus 3 squares plus 4 squares. So the 1 plus 4 plus 9 plus 16. It's a much faster addition. The sum becomes much greater. But in the end, it still have to be infinity. Those infinity in the end are still infinities. But the square infinity came up to the infinity faster than, and the cube one cube plus 2 cube plus 3 cube plus 4 cube and so on and forth, also will end up to infinity, the sign of infinity. But if you take the first, let's say, 50 members of this series, the cube infinity of the 50 limited infinity is greater than the linear or square. So even infinities have different strengths as they come up from the finite to the infinite.
I think the story is told of the infinite hotel. And the traveler comes to this hotel with an infinite number of rooms. And he says, can you put me up for the night? He says, I'm sorry, we're full. Got an infinite number of guests. And the traveler says, well, wait a minute, there's a way around this. If you move the guest in room 1 to room 2, and the guest in room 2 to room 3, and so on, and just carry on doing that infinitely, then room 1 will be available and I can take it. And the story goes on, but it got more complicated because then an infinite number of guests arrived and said, can we stay in this hotel? And he said, well, how do I make room for an infinite number of guests? I've already got an infinite number of guests. And the mathematics, I have to be more careful here. I don't think I can give you the accurate way of counting, but you move an infinite number of guests, an infinite number of spaces to the left, so to speak, and put the new infinite number of guests in place, and the other infinite guests move on. So you can have as many infinities in that hotel as you like. And that just shows some of the paradoxes of thinking about infinity just in numbers alone, let alone in.
Isn't that John similar to that? There is a concept, I forgot how the what's his name, the guy who very fast runner, Greek personage, not Heraclius or something, that he's very fast runner, but you'll never, how does it go? Like if in 10 seconds in 10 seconds he covers 100 meters, but it means in 5 seconds only.
Hermes.
Zeno's paradox, yeah.
Yeah. So if you keep divide 100 meters to 50 and 50 and 25 and 25 and 12 and a half and then 6 and a quarter and then 3 and an 8, less and less and less, it turns out to be that he'll never move. He can't move from his spot because it just he always has to cover an infinitely small distance in infinitely small time.
I think what he was doing, he knew perfectly well that Achilles can run faster than the tortoise. So he's pointing out that the mathematics was not sufficiently skillful to deal with this issue. They hadn't got a mathematics of speed, of change positioning with respect to time.
Calculus.
And so that for the Greeks, it was a paradox. And you need things like the differential calculus to solve it.
Yeah.
Now, he had lots of lovely paradoxes as well. I can't remember all of them. Oh yes, the arrow. At any given moment in time, an arrow is still for a minute fraction of time, an infinitely small fraction of time. The arrow is not moving, even though you've released it with the bow. So he was able to show, well, with our mathematics, clearly the arrow cannot fly.
Right.
Ask any soldier and he will tell you different. Yeah.
So does the world revolve around the sun, or does the sun revolve around the Earth?
Well, I was trained at the University of Chicago, and they're very theoretically oriented. And the joke was that University of Chicago, people don't say, well, that may work in practice. Does it work in theory? They say, that may work. That works in theory, but does it work in practice? Well, apparently Zeno's theory didn't work. It worked in practice, didn't work in theory.
I wonder also, like, relating to the people that, we talk sometimes about God and Torah and universe and creation, and I'm thinking that somebody who, let's say, doesn't believe in creation at all, completely agnostic or atheist or whatever they call it, it's still, that person, I mean, I understand the concept that people will be agnostic, saying, I don't believe in God. Fine with me. I mean, I perfectly fine with the concept, but then you cannot explain the beginning, because what happened 1 billion years ago? What happened 10 billion? What happened before that? There was a Big Bang. What happened before the Big Bang? So ultimately, nobody can explain the originations of the entire presence. And we, people who are religious, cannot really explain that either. And people who don't believe in that also can't explain. So that inability to explain, I think it's a great unifier for us, and mutual respect. Because we can't explain this, might as well get along and have a coffee and a cake and go fishing together and do something nice, play chess, uh, because we are united in the fact that we cannot really explain the origins anyway, and we're happy with that. Maybe that's the way God made it. And I always joke to say, atheists will say, agnostic will say, thank God I don't believe in this stuff. So, so we're united in our inability to perceive the infinity in origins, and that itself
I'm
is a
reminded,
humbling realization for everybody.
I'm reminded of the joke about little old ladies listening to a physicist give a lecture at the university, and she's in the back, and he's talking about the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, and she says, wait a second. She says, I happen to know that the whole world stands on a great turtle. That was the first turtle. And the physicist says, well, ma'am, what's under that turtle? She says, another turtle. He says, under that one? She says, wait a minute, Sonny. Stole it right there. It's turtles all the way down. You know,
That was taken up by the English comic novel writer Terry Pratchett, who wrote a series of books that always made me laugh about disc world. Of course, the world is not round, it's a disc, it's a flat disc, and it's supported on a giant turtle, which is in turn supported on 4 elephants, and so on. And it's flying through the sky. What keeps it going? Well, magic, of course. So the power of his universe was not physics, but magic. And
well, in a way, it seems like the worlds of physics are magic sometimes.
I commend them too, if you like to have a laugh. They are a bit English. He was an English writer. And
interesting. I heard a very interesting talk by Jordan Peterson. You may have heard of him. He's is
he feeling well now? He's better now?
Yeah, he's doing a little better. But he's a psychologist, but it's also somewhat a philosopher. He says the main strain or difficulty of being human is trying to negotiate the interface between the finite and the infinite. That we're finite, but we're surrounded by a seemingly infinite universe and an infinity of possibilities. And to try to grasp that and cope with that is one of the problems of being human. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it's an interesting idea. You can say in a sense that the existential anxiety that so many young people feel now that creates so much anxiety and depression and rising suicide is the feeling of facing the chaos of reality and the harshness of parts of life, and not being able to cope with the idea that they're actually mortal and they're going to die. It just creates this whole cycle of anxiety, which it's interesting because the religious person accepts the idea of the an infinite God, but somehow we can relax in that idea. It's not easy. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around, because I didn't grow up religious, and I had a religious experience when I was about 19. And my parents were communist socialists, and I had that attitude until that experience. And I always find thinking of somebody with infinite power like God, like any human being with infinite power, just push me around, squash me, and bully me if he had that much power, like a Stalin or somebody like that. But God is not that. It's a complete, you have to think on a higher level, on a deeper level. But it took me a little while to work that out in my head.
I'm just wondering, Ruben, on the flip side, I feel the same way as you do, actually, in that sense, because I think it's a great consoling feeling that puts your mind at ease and puts your psyche at ease, puts your anxiety at ease. But I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate, no pun intended, to say that if I would believe in the materialistic world, a rational universe, I will say that's a weakness of your guys, of religious people. That's exactly why you believe in this, because you want to have a consolation of your worries, of your anxieties, of your phobias. and believe in the creator and almighty and infinity gives you a break. Nothing to worry about it. It's like, okay, well, take Valium for that, or take medicine, and it'll get you the same effect. I, the non-believer in this, a strong individual. I'm a real individual. I face the fact that it's a difficult choice. It's difficult things, transit into the unknown. But makes me a better human being. That's what really, if I would use your terms, the creator, not that I would use your terms, but if I use your terms, the creator probably created me with ability to face the reality and not to be despondent and anxiety driven and worry about it. That's a real person in me. That is why I would say that is how the agnostic, I think, can make an argument. But aren't you worried about the future, about death, about it? No, I don't worry about it. They're just how the way world exists. We all die and we go to nowhere, and that's fine. I can see that answers. Not everybody feels like that, but I can see that's an answer that somebody will. And I don't know how to come to that way. So I said, well, that's a point. That's a view.
So, yeah, it's funny today. On one of the family chats, one of my my wife's siblings shared a little clip from one of her babysitter. For her son was having a conversation with the babysitter, and he's like a 4-year-old, and he said, "I don't understand what's so fun about riding a bike. Your legs are just moving round and round. And why is that fun? And why is chewing food, like you're just moving your mouth? Why do people like eating? You're just moving your mouth. It's such a waste of time. It's just such a silly thing." And then we get a whole conversation about this little 4-year-old. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, "What are you going to do today?" And she said, "I'm just going to be doing silly things and wasting my time." So anyway, I think it's the same kind of concept of Koheles, which is like ultimately everything we do is just going round and round. And so, like another war, and we know what's going to happen and the outcome, and it's going to be a new, so what's the point in anything? How is anyone supposed to, if someone really perceives the world from that perspective, that everything we do is ultimately just at the end going to be futile, like what's the point in it? Then why would anyone have any will to live? I don't get, maybe for the future generations, for our children, maybe they'll figure it out. I don't know, like what. And I think the only, at least from Judaism's perspective, it's the big picture of making the world a better place. And there's some kind of, at least meaning, or seemingly like the best ideology of like making the whole world a better place for everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike, that kind of, helps keep that perspective. I don't know. I'm just.
But why would you dismiss the alternative answer, which is probably identical? Koheles ends on the point that after going through all this, nothing new under the sky, he ultimately comes to a conclusion that just serve God, do the God's will, and that's the entire purpose of man. That's what he comes to. But agnostic can come to exactly.
Some people say that was tacked on later because they found the whole thing too depressing. Have you heard that, John? That ending was tacked on later, but who can know really?
And have Torah on a downbeat note. You always add a little verse if it's a bad ending to cheer you up at the end.
I say reading that book, I think I was probably the most suicidal point in my life I've ever, until I actually finished it. I read it over like a 2-day period. I was like, I got to finish this to see the punchline because this is not good.
But when you get to the punchline, it was nice, right?
If you don't have the punchline, but suicide, why is that any better? It's unpredictable what's going to be there. And statistically, most people in the world believe that it's actually worse on the other end. So, why take a chance?
No, but like Reuven said, maybe Koheles does not end on a good note. Maybe that old note was added later. What's a halacha? What's a real Koheles?
So what's the point then? I mean, why is he bringing this all? I mean, the point he brings out, as far as I think it's true. I mean, every element of it. You do this and you do that. So what's the point? And if you don't have that last paragraph over there, you're kind of left with the question that everyone has: what's the purpose of creation? What are we here for? And that's it.
That again that's that thing of the feeling of vulnerability before the infinite. The idea that things just go round and round and round and round. It's this big cycle, never ending, the snake eating its tail. I mean, even the universe, you go out in that direction and you end up eventually coming back from the other direction. It's all big, it's like it's an infinite circle. So I think that is, where was I going with this? It's that's the basic anxiety that we face, and that if you think a lot, it can get inside your head, make you a little nutty. Well, Dostoevsky said, there's two kinds of people in the world, and there's notes from Underground: people who think and don't do anything, and people who do and they don't think about anything. They just smash through walls and do whatever they have to do. And he says basically the end result of contemplation is thumb twiddling. But I think the more you think,
which one is
the more
recommended?
conscious you are, the more that anxiety about the facing the infinite and the vulnerability of the human becomes more.
Which of those two models is better one, Ruben?
The fine balance, the balance between them.
It's interesting. Dostoevsky says in the end, it's even being paralyzed by thinking so much, he still prefers to be a person who thinks. At least he has some idea, a little glimmer of what's going on, was the person who just acts all the time.
No wonder he was crazy.
Yeah, well,
ignorance is bliss. He might be better off.
Very interesting. It's I saw a study they did of 6-year-old children, who I think kids in the 6th grade who were trying to evaluate how likely they were to suffer from depression. And I found that the upper 10% of intelligence had 6 times as much depression as the other 90%. And the biological explanation is that the more you think, the more strain on the brain, and ultimately it leads to more depression. But so depressive people sometimes kill themselves. So isn't that biologically disadvantageous? And the idea is that the upper 10% come up with most of the great innovations that help other people and help, food distribution and government and law and everything. So if a few of them kill themselves off, it pays off in the long run. But
even the ones who are making all these great things for humanity just mentioned, they still continuously depressed, right? They still continuously overthink things.
Always depressed. It's but they're more prone to it. It's it's just it tends to be an affliction of intelligent people. You can also get it from stress and various things, but it's more common with as you go up in intelligence. It gets more and more common.
John, what was I going to say? I saw you were trying to make a comment.
Well, talking about the two different types of people, those who think and those who do, reminds me of a poem by Rudyard Kipling, the rather old-fashioned, out-of-fashion English poet. And he wrote a poem called The Sons of Martha and the Sons of Mary. But the problem is,
yeah, I'm home on a webcast.
This is based on the New Testament, on the Gospel. When Jesus came to a house, whose the housekeeper was called Martha, and she was quite put out because he came with all his disciples, and he gave a great drosha, and he sat down, and her sister Mary washed his feet and dried his feet with her hair and sat at his feet and listened to his great words. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Martha was busy with the pots and the pans and cutting the vegetables and cooking, making the bread. And she got cross. And Kipling was on the side of Martha. He said there are two sorts of people. There are those who sit in lordly splendor, traveling first-class carriages in a railway train. Remember, he was Victorian period. And spreading peace and light throughout the world with their great ideas. And meanwhile, the train driver is shoveling coal and operating levers, and the switchman is making sure the train runs safely on the tracks and goes in the right direction. And those are the two kinds of people in the world. those who think and dream under the lords of creation, and those who do the hard work. And you can actually see that in real life if you look for it. I thought it was rather a nice twist to the story.
What are there people that combine both, kind of to Menachem's point, or do you have to have two types of people both to complement each other? Can the person be both?
Elon Musk. He must be both.
I've
Does he
often
make
wondered
the car
about-
himself, or does he simply tell somebody how to do it?
Who, Elon Musk?
He has the
Yeah, think
genius
about-
for sizing things up quickly and knowing what
Think about
might
Michael
work, what
Faraday.
might not.
Think about Michael Faraday.
Yeah.
He was a brilliant experimenter. He was one of these men, and everything he touched worked. If you ever tried to do some of his experiments, they're quite fiddly. And he had the knack of making the electric wires do the right thing and come up with the results that he was imagining in his mind. His imagination was very fertile, and he came up with ideas that nobody else thought of, that electricity and magnetism were linked. He was hopeless at mathematics because he had no
Maxwell was what put it all together.
Yeah, he was a poor man from a poor background. He was a blacksmith's son, and he was an apprentice before he became a scientist. But he could imagine, and he could do the experiments. And there's an example of a person who could do both. He was also, I might add, an extremely kind, thoughtful, good-humored gentleman, which is unusual in many circles. Often geniuses are rather bad-tempered and grumpy, but he was the opposite.
I
So, yes, you can
I like
have
that.
people.
I like that a lot, what you just said, John. It's a very soothing story, you know, when you think of this. I just think about it. To live the
There
life.
are other geniuses, like Boltzmann, who invented the theory of thermodynamics, and he was a depressive, and he committed suicide about the same period as Faraday.
Mhm.
So you can get both types, those who can't handle their thoughts and those who do.
Or maybe they were driven, I guess if somebody is driven of implementing the idea, people are very passionate about it, they want to implement it. And there are some people who just do it, and if it's implemented, it's fine. I kind of feel like in the phase of my life I kind of like the non-confrontational existence. I like to have my ideas and have completely no problem with any opposite ideas whatsoever. I don't like to prove anything. I mean, I like to see another. I like to see another
Liking
point
and
of
being
view.
is two different things.
Huh?
You like something and want to be something, and actually to be it is, I found for myself is two different things.
I'm just saying, like, say, I have a certain beliefs, and somebody else has different beliefs. Take me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was going through my Balchor process, I would just say, if on Shabbat, you break Shabbat not at 5:53, but 5:52, before sun sets, not 12 degrees, but 18 degrees, I say, listen, you don't know halacha, you should study more, you should do this. And now I'm ashamed of my past on doing this stuff like that. I was just like a blubbering whatever. And I find so much, I'm interested to know if somebody brings an opinion. On what basis do you say that? What's your basic belief? I'm just curious, I'm interested, but I have no impulse, no inner desire to change the person's view. I have complete
But
respect.
that thing with David a few weeks ago,
Well,
That
I lost,
business with
I
David.
lost, it helped me. I was telling you, and Robert, and you rightly, I mean, you and I rode a bike and you told me I was out of line, which I was. Sometimes unfortunately, I still have like traces of of my younger myself in me. And every so often I lose control and I'll become this, oh, wait, but what, and all of a sudden, curiosity to know your position becomes aggressiveness to show you how wrong your position is. So I have the tendency, unfortunately, sometimes, but that's no longer my inner reality. That's a slips into unfortunate emotional temptation that my soul can fall into it. But overall, when I sit rational and think about it, I can sit with agnostic and a Buddhist next to me and Confucianist and religious, like super religious mercenary guy next to me. And I want to know what's your story, what do you think? And the guy says, and I'm probably fine with it. I have no need to say, such a nice guy, but how come he doesn't think that way? I don't have this desire. And I find it very soothing and
is,
comfortable.
people tend to feel that their beliefs, they become very personal. And if you disagree or attack their beliefs, they feel personally offended. It arouses a very strong reaction. And we can see that happening now in Europe, United States, where, it's getting very polarized. It's, yeah, well, it's like Mark Twain said, we like a man to come right out and say what he thinks when he agrees with us. It's just, it's very hard. You have to be very confident in yourself
But is
to
it,
be able
but,
to separate yourself from your ideas and not, mix the two up. It's
but is it, but in a different room in what you're saying? Let's say the person, let's say I believe in something and I can control my righteousness and I'll tell everybody else how wrong they are. Or I believe in what I believe. I think that other people are wrong, but I'm polite and nice person not to go and offend people by pushing my belief. That's the second level. And the third level, I believe in what I believe. And I really don't have any need to ascertain that those are correct. The other person's belief could be just as correct, even though it's completely opposite of mine. I have no need even to prove anything.
well,
Something
part of the
interesting.
problem is, at least in politics, is sometimes people's core values conflict. And when it comes to political decisions, for instance, the idea that abortion is bad may be sacred to religious people, and the idea abortion is good may be sacred to non-religious people. And it's hard to come up with a set of laws that satisfies both. And that's why it gets so testy. It's, the people have differing values, moral compasses about what's valuable, and it has serious consequences as far as, how the laws run. And
John, I have a question. We have a minute left. Would you like us to log in, come back on for another 10 minutes, or should be, how do you?
Sure, till the end of the hour, yeah, why not?
Okay, all right, let's do
go to
this.
9, yeah.
Okay, let's log off and log back in. So I see you like in 2 minutes.
Okay.